We're going to keep looking at solving rational problems, except today we're going to look at inequalities instead of equations. When solving a rational inequality, you want to solve it just like the related equation. So pretend it's the same thing, just instead of a less than, greater than type sign, you have an equals. When you're done, we're going to also need to check our denominator to figure out where do we get division by 0. So we're going to have to figure out where's the domain exclusion. Then once you're done with that, we just want to then graph that on any related number line so that we have a picture of what it looks like, and then just make sure you test to make sure that it works. All right, so let's try one out here. In example 1, we want to solve this rational inequality. You can see that we have some denominators here of b. So just like the equation problems, we want to get all these so that they're b. So this first term, we want a denominator b, which means we also need to multiply the top by b. So what we end up with is 7b over b minus 2 over b is less than 5 over b. Now that we have on the left side a common denominator, we can combine these two fractions into a single fraction. Now we can multiply both sides by b here, and our denominators cancel out just like they did with the equations, and we have now 7b minus 2 is less than 5. If we solve this out, we should get our answer. 7b, if we add 2 to both sides, it's less than 7. Divide by 7, you get 1. Remember when you're working with inequalities too, that if you ever end up multiplying or dividing by a negative, that you switch the sign. Okay, so this, for the most part, should be our answer. However, when you're dealing with inequalities, there's many numbers that are solutions to this. Basically, any number less than 1 should be an answer. However, there is one number here that won't work when we put it in here, and that's whatever we get when our denominator, our common denominator here, which ends up being b, was our common denominator. Okay, whatever makes that equal 0, we can't do. So in this case, b cannot be 0. If we put 0 here, and for b, we get division by 0, and we know from prior lessons that you can't divide by 0. So our answer is that b can be less than 1, except that b also cannot equal 0. So now on our number line, we want to graph that out. So to graph that out, label your number line so that you have some numbers on here. And then you want to graph it out. So less than 1, we want to start at 1. You got to decide, should we go open circle or closed circle? Closed circle is if you want to count the point. We don't want to count the point on this one because it's not equal to 1. And then it should be going this way. Now normally we'd be done like this, but remember 0 is not an answer. So at 0, instead of the line going through there, we want an open circle at 0 as well. So it should not be at that point. So your graph should look something like that. Everything should be graphed in to the left except 0 does not work. All right. Let's try another one here. Number 2, same thing. We want to get common denominator. Looks like a couple of these have an a, so we need an a. We also want to find what's the least common multiple of 2, 8, and 4. I believe all those go into 8, so we want all these to be 8. So this first one should get times by 2. The second term has the common denominator. We don't need to mess with that one. This last one, we need a 4 and an a. So multiply through now, and we're going to get 2 plus 5 over the common denominator of 8a greater than 4a over 8a. If we multiply both sides by 8a, these cancel out. And so we just got to solve what's left. This is the same as 9. And we get, if we divide here by 4, now we get 1.75. All right, now we again need to figure out what is the exclusion. There's an exclusion here if we got a variable in the denominator. Our common denominator was 8a here, so what makes this equal to 0? Because that's what we can't have. So if we divide both of these sides by 8, it looks like, again, a cannot be 0. Okay, now we want to graph that out. Now be careful on these ones graphing. A lot of students have a tough time graphing ones like this where the variable's on the right side rather than the left side. If we want to graph this, this should be the same thing if we switch these around as a here, 1.75 here, and see how our symbol is pointing at a? It should be pointing at a here, so this is all the numbers less than 1.75. So now we want to label our number line and graph that out. So if we label it here, and you'd want to label something where you can get these numbers on. I'm going to go by 0.25 here so we can kind of get all these on. So 0, we'll say that this is 1 here. Say this is 2 and 3. So every other line's a half. So 1.75 is going to be right about here. So we're going to go open circle. It's going this way, except when we hit 0, also not a value there because we said that a cannot equal 0. So the graph would look something like that. Okay, on the next one, number 3 here, we want to do the same thing. Now graph this out. Get the common denominator looks like. We have both a 6 and a y minus 1, so common denominator is going to be 6 times y minus 1. This last term needs a y minus 1. This middle one needs a 6. This first term has no denominator. It needs both. So the top also needs to get multiplied by both. And so what we end up with here is 6 times y minus 1 plus, I'll multiply these together. 5 times 6 is going to be 30. Less than or equal to 7. Now if we multiply both sides, our denominator should cancel out. Okay, so we got to solve what's left. If we do some distributing here, on both sides we get this. Now we got to keep solving. I'm going to combine these like terms. Now you got to just pick something. I'm going to choose the minus 6y here. Or you could do anything. You could minus 24, whatever you want to do. It's kind of up to you how you want to solve this one. You got to pick one of those two things. Let's minus 24. Okay, so if you subtract 24, that cancels out. You got 6y. It's less than or equal to 7y minus 31. Okay, then we would have to minus 7y. These cancel out, so you got negative 1y is less than or equal to negative 31. Last step, divide. Okay, remember before how we talked about inequalities? Anytime you get divide by negative, divide it out. So you got y, this should be positive 31. But in this case, since we divide by negative, we do need to switch the sign. So we get that y is greater than 31. Now again, check the denominator. Our denominator in this one was 6. Y minus 1 was our common denominator. We want to figure out what's going to make that equal to 0 because we can't have that equal to 0. So here, if we divide by 6, this is still going to be 0. And add 1 to both sides, looks like y cannot equal 1 on this one. If y is 1, 1 minus 1, that's going to equal 0. We can't have that. So we want to graph this out. That y has to be greater than or equal to 31. Also that y cannot equal 1. Well, in this case, I think we're okay. If we all our answers have to be bigger than 31, our graph is never going to cross through 1. So we don't have any open circles on this one. We just want to label our graph here make sure we get our number on here, 31. This one would be a closed circle at 31 going to the right because it's all the numbers greater. All right, why don't you pause the video quick, try out number 4 on your own, and then hit play to kind of see how you did. All right, hopefully you did pretty good on this one. Let's check it out. It looks like our least common denominator on this one's going to be 15x. So we got to multiply this one by 5 on both top and bottom, the next one by 3, and this last one by an x. So we end up with 5 minus 6 over our common denominator is less than x over 15x. At this point, these would cancel out. You got negative 1 is less than x. There's really no solving left to be done. We just need to now graph that. Remember though, on these ones, probably want your variable on the left, since most of you are more comfortable with that. It's pointing at the negative 1. It should be pointing at the negative 1 here. So it's all the numbers greater than negative 1. Also though, we need to check our least common denominator of 15x. We know it can't be equal to 0. So if we divide both sides by 15, looks like x cannot equal 0 on this one. So we want to graph that out. Again, label your number line some way so you can get the numbers on here. We want to start at negative 1. Okay, we're going greater than, and it should be open circle because we don't want to count negative 1. Should be going this way till we hit 0. No point there, and keep going. So that would be a graph of this one. All right, try some more of these problems out on the worksheet.